Traders, how are you? With Marcello, doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Absolutely insane week, predicated by the collapse in crypto markets. It literally had its worst week ever. The market cap of cryptos as a whole went down by $250 billion. And we'll get into the details of that, with the second largest exchange in the crypto space literally going bankrupt and now finding out they were doing some fraudulent things. And we also have very good news on the inflation front, which allowed all of the exchanges to continue to explode to the upside. And we even have good news as well with the war in Ukraine. Let's get started. Biggest piece of news is that the inflation came out under the expected 8%. It was reported in October at 7.7. That has huge indications, because now maybe the Fed, the central bank in the United States, isn't going to raise interest rates as much as people thought. And that's part of the reason why we're walking into this kind of destruction of the economy, because as they continue to raise interest rates, it costs more to buy a house, it costs more to rent a car, your credit card bills cost more, and obviously that allows you to finance a lot more things. For example, at a 2% or 3% mortgage, you can afford to buy 2 or 3 houses, but at a 7% mortgage, you might be only able to buy 1, right? So that's really, really good news. I don't think it's going to last. We're probably going to see the increase, or continuing to increase, probably in, I want to say, January, February. This has to do with the winter coming, and obviously with the winter means they have to buy a lot more gas and a lot more fuel and other things as well. So I think that's probably going to extend until that point. The dollar went down, lost quite a bit this week. That's part of the reason why a lot of other markets went up. Remember that most of the markets, when I say markets, meaning commodities and futures, is based on dollars. So if the dollar goes down, for example, gold and silver generally go up. Stock markets in the US, mostly positive. The S&P 500 had its best day since April 2020. The NASDAQ, which is mostly technological stocks, had its best day in history on Thursday at 7.3%. Canada was also positive. An Apple single-day surge of $119 billion set a stock market record. So we had a great week in the markets. European market news, mostly positive. In Europe, looking here at the numbers, 4-5% were some of the most positive. Latin American markets were mixed. In Brazil, they had an election. So now, just like the United States, for example, before these midterm elections, where the Democrats or the left controlled the entire government in the United States, now all of Latin America is controlled by the left as well. Colombia fell. Chile, the only first world country in Latin America, fell. And now Brazil fell as well. So their stock was down. Stock market was down. But other than that, most of the other markets in Latin America was up. Africa and the Middle East, mostly mixed, with South Africa taking the crown there as the most positive. And then in the far east, we have Taiwan. Overall, those markets were mixed, but Taiwan was the most positive. The other big news of the week was a situation with FTX, but before we get to that point, October now was the biggest month for crypto hacks in history. There were more than $760 million stolen in the month of October, the most ever. And obviously that, and mostly because of the FTX news, second largest crypto exchange in the world, went bankrupt. They supposedly were doing some funny business with customer funds. I wanted to do a video just specifically talking about that situation, because there's a lot of little information I wanted to include. Let me guys know there in the comments if you guys want me to do that video. During the week, there was a situation where Binance, which is the largest exchange in the world, signed a non-binding, what's called an LOI, or letter of intent, to buy FTX. But then after they looked under the hood and did their due diligence, they found out that they're not doing some kosher things. Now the SEC is involved, so Binance backed out of the deal. And at one point, Bitcoin dropped over 14%, Ethereum dropped over 19%. And this might cause a problem, for example, on the political side in the United States, because Sam Friedman, which is the co-founder or founder of FTX, He was the second biggest donor to the Democratic Party after George Soros. So now they're not going to have that slush fund anymore. Really big funds are also affected. For example, the Teachers Pension Fund in Ontario. Ontario is the biggest state, I should say the most populous state in Canada. For example, like Florida or California, Texas. They call them provinces, by the way. So don't yell at me if you guys are Canadian and I'm not saying it right. I think I got the point across. And even the biggest hedge fund in the world, like BlackRock, had money invested, and now all that is going to zero. Crypto.com, which is another huge exchange in the crypto space, after this huge fiasco, wanted to report and have transparent information. They are reporting that 20% of their reserves are in the shitcoin, excuse my French, Shiba Inu. Let's just throw this out here. Let's say you have let's talk about countries, right? Like we're crypto space. What if a country like Canada or Spain or the United States put 20% of their reserves in a country like a third world backwards country? Let's call it, I don't know. I'm trying to think here. Maybe South Africa or Nigeria or like Paraguay, for example, in South Latin America, or, you know, Honduras. Right? Can you imagine the loss in faith that would give for a country to be invested 20% in just like, you know, just a country that just isn't, you shouldn't be investing into? Shiba Inu, if you guys didn't know, she was the best. Shiba I love that meme. I gotta get the, look at this. I gotta get the hair back. So Shiba Inu is literally just a joke. It's a meme coin. It's where literally they just created it as a joke, and it's valued below almost zero. And I mean, this is the thing that I've always been telling you guys from the beginning. It's not that Bitcoin is a scam. It's not that cryptos are a scam. It's that there are a lot of scams in the crypto space. So as I've said from the beginning, be extremely careful where you invest your money, because the crypto market is falling apart quite rapidly. It seems to me as well that this is just a huge contagion, right? We had Alameda fall. We had Archegos fall last year. Now it's gotten up to the second largest crypto exchange in the world. I mean, what's next, right? So Bitcoin plunged over 14%, dropping to its lowest level in 2 years. For the week, it was down close to 27%, and it's now down over 60% in 2022. In commodities, the French nuclear reactor power outlook worsens ahead of the winter. Electric prices have been exploding. Of the 56 reactors that they have, all of them are extremely old. They haven't built anything because France's economy isn't really doing that well. They're not exactly, what's the best way to phrase it? They're not capitalists. They're not open for business. So there's a lot of regulation and red tape and costs involved with doing new things, which is why they haven't invested in that. But they had to do a lot of routine maintenance to a lot of these reactors. They haven't been able to do that. One of the main reasons is because of the strikes for the workers. I mean, what amazing people the French are, right? The people who work in the reactors, knowing that they have an energy crisis in Europe, they just decide to go on strike. Now just pay us more money. See how that works? One of Spain's largest hydropower plants is going to halt operations as well as the drought worsens. So now the energy crisis in Europe is getting even worse. And we're literally walking into the winter when they need that electric more than anything. Definitely not going to be fun time for Europe. Crude and Brent are both down big. The U.S. crude went down over 4%, while Brent went down close to 3%. This has to do with the situation where China now is having its biggest outbreak of the pandemic, the virus of the pandemic. I don't want to say it because I don't want them to shut down this channel like they did the last one. But they committed, they remember we talked about a few weeks how they were talking about maybe getting rid of that strict pandemic policy where if they have one, I'll just give you an example, if they have one outbreak or one person that's identified with the virus, they'll literally just shut down an entire city of millions of people. So the last few weeks, they have been hinting that maybe they'll start loosening up that policy. But now, since they're having their worst outbreak since the pandemic, they're going right back to that super strict policy. So obviously that affects the whole world because even babies are made in China. Everything practically is made in China. Even Apple now is having quite a problem with the iPhone 14s because they fabricate them in the place where they're having one of the biggest outbreaks. So big problem. According to the data provided to the London bullion market, the holdings of physical silver held across the vaults in London has dropped to a record low in October. This is big news because essentially great English, right? This is essentially where the majority of the gold and silver markets are located. So the indication that they're dropping the inventories at a record low, that means that more and more people are taking physical delivery of the metal, which means that at some point, I don't know if it's going to be in a year from now or 2 years from now, most likely when the inflation picks back up in the United States and the dollar starts to fall quite a bit, we're going to have a huge explosion. Because guess what? Silver that's sitting right here, for example, doesn't disappear like the second largest crypto exchange. Has been money for thousands of years. The Swiss investment bank UBS has forecasted a rebound for gold prices next year. Rising interest rates means that gold has lost 18% since March. And overall for the week, the precious metals market were super positive. Gold was up over 5%, 1772, and silver was up over 4% to $21.80. Financial and banking news, the second biggest bank in Germany, Commerzbank, their net profit dropped by 52% in Q3. Luckily, that was actually better than expected. Their shares went down over 8% on the deal. Inflation in India is running almost twice of what they want the target to be. The target is 4%. They're at 7.4% now. And one of the little things that I want you guys to realize is there was a point in time in history where the economies of the world didn't work with central banks. The United States, for example, is the one that we have now is the third central bank that we have had in our history. We had one, it failed. We had a second, it failed. And now we're on the third one, which it most likely is going to fail, I would say, in the next 5 to 10 years. So I want you guys to think of, and maybe look it up on Google, the period between the second central bank and the third central bank was one of the most prosperous times in history due to the fact that money was considered gold. And because gold can only be mined at a certain rate, they can't just create money out of thin air. The US slid on Thursday against the other basket of currencies as investors cheered the CPI report. Remember that if the interest rates are going to continue rising, that creates a much higher demand for the dollar. Now that the inflation rate is lower than what the expectation was, then people aren't going to demand the dollar as much, and that's part of the reason why we had that big drop. For example, the huge rises in gold and silver. Most of the world still works on dollars, so things like commodities, oil, gold and silver, nickel, most, physical products are all in dollars. The US index shed over 2%. Worst daily performance since December of 2015, and now it's on its pace for its worst week since 2020. Political news, the midterms were this week. Supposedly, the Republicans are going to take control of the House of Representatives, so hopefully we can have some sort of control because this absolute disaster of a situation that we have with inflation in the economy. The Democrats have been in control of the government for the last 2 years, so kind of nowhere to point the finger to other than that. Biden said that he was eager to work with congressional Republicans after the midterms, but he stressed that he will not compromise on issues like abortion rights and Social Security. And Sweden, the country that decided to not close schools, not force masks on people, now has the lowest excess mortality after the pandemic. I wonder why. Just reporting stats. No conspiracy theories here. Just reporting stats. Economic news, higher gas and oil prices are draining billions of euros from the German economy. Households this year are going to spend 1.8% of the economic output to be able to pay for the increase in these prices, which is essentially inflation. In the next 3 years, they're expecting to spend an extra 110 billion euros or 3% of the annual economic output. So if they don't get that fixed, we're probably going to be walking into a pretty bad situation because Germany, remember, is the largest economy in Europe fourth largest in the world after US, China, and Japan. US initial job claims came in 5,000 above expectations at 225,000. The UK economy contracted by 0.2% in quarter three. That is less than what the expectation was going to be in quarter five, but obviously everyone's expecting the UK, which if I'm not mistaken is the eighth or ninth largest economy in the world, to walk into a very bad recession. Corporate news, Tesla shares fell over 7% on Wednesday after Elon Musk reported that he sold another $4 billion worth of shares. Probably going to have to inject that into Twitter since they're losing $4 million a day. They're down 16% this month alone, and that's lowest level since November 2020. Disney stock cratered over 13% on Wednesday after they had absolutely atrocious quarterly results. And Monday, Ryanair, which is Europe's largest passenger airline, it's a low-cost airline like Spirit Airlines, for example, had their largest profit in the summer. They made $1.36 billion the 6 months ending in September. Renault and Google are starting to connect their services, where Renault is going to use their Google software services. It's going to help them to modernize their equipment, which means that every time you buy a Renault now, they're going to track everything you do. And Adidas cut the full year guidance after their termination of their partnership with Kanye West because of the anti-Semitic statements that he made. They're expecting to have 50% less net income after severing that relationship. Facebook, its parent Meta, is planning on letting go 13% of its staff, or 11,000 employees. The social media stock now is down over 66% in 2022. Everybody's worried about these billions of dollars that Facebook is putting into the metaverse, where literally, you guys should see literally what it looks like. It looks like video games from 30 years ago. It's really bad. China's trade data fell short of expectations, marking the first annual decline in exports since May of 2020. That's really bad because remember, everything, even babies, are made in China. So if they have a drop in exports, that means that the whole world is ordering less things from China. And remember that the majority of the economies around the world, advanced economies, run on consumer spending. The United States, for example, is nearly 70% consumer spending. So if people are ordering less stuff from China, that means that they're spending less money, which means that we're in a bad situation. In technology, a new deep space ground is being built in South Africa in the semi-desert Karoo region, which is going to come online in 2025 to be able to send missions to the moon and elsewhere. That's awesome. And in international news, I mentioned about the huge outbreak in China. And another piece of good news is in Russia, they ordered their troops on Wednesday to withdraw from the entire region of west of the Dnipro River. I hope I'm saying that correct. It's one of the only regional cities that Russia captured in the 9 months of war. So hopefully we'll have a little de-escalation there. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, leave your comments, and don't forget, the preppers were right.